On March 23, 2015, around 2 p.m., the Vallejo Police Department in California received a call. The man on the line identified himself as Aaron Quinn and reported that his girlfriend had been kidnapped by intruders wearing wetsuits, and he had no idea where they had taken her. Aaron explained that he had also been in the house at the time of the abduction, but was unable to call 911 right away because the intruders had drugged him, blindfolded him, and warned him not to contact the police. Here is what Aaron Quinn told investigators. Around 3 a.m., he and his girlfriend Denise Huskins were awakened by a voice saying,
"Wake up, this is a robbery."
The intruders immediately told them they didn't want to hurt them and were only after money. They ordered Denise to tie Aaron's hands and feet. Then they told her to get into the bedroom closet, face down, and not to look at them. Denise tried not to argue, not wanting to give them a reason to kill her, but she managed to see the legs of several intruders. They tied up Denise and left the two of them lying in the closet. But before that, they placed swimming goggles on their eyes, goggles with lenses covered in black tape. They also put headphones over their ears and gave them instructions through pre-recorded messages. Importantly, they addressed Aaron by name, meaning they knew both of their names and the layout of the house. This was a well-organized and carefully planned crime. The criminals said they would give them sleeping pills, and if they refused to take them, they would be injected. They then demanded all of their financial information, warning that if either of them lied, the other would be shocked or have their face slashed. Denise and Aaron complied and answered all of their questions. At one point, however, the intruders seemed to realize they had the wrong couple. One of them asked Aaron if Denise looked like his ex-fiancée. It turned out they hadn't come for Aaron and Denise at all. They were targeting Aaron and his ex. She had moved out recently, and Aaron had just finished moving out the last of her things. The intruders began discussing what to do next. Denise started to hope they might simply leave, but she was wrong. When the apparent leader of the group returned, he announced that they would be taking Denise for 48 hours so that Aaron could carry out a few tasks for them. The intruders moved Aaron to the couch. They told him a camera had been installed in the room to monitor his every move, and red duct tape had been placed on the floor, walls, and windows to mark the boundary he was not allowed to cross. One of the intruders taped Aaron's ankles and asked if he was comfortable. Aaron replied that he was cold and asked for a blanket. The intruder apologized and said he hadn't realized how cold it was because they were all wearing wetsuits, presumably to avoid leaving any evidence behind. The intruder said he would be giving instructions via email and text. In the morning, Aaron was to call his work and report in sick, then use Denise's phone to message her boss, saying she had a family emergency and would be gone for a week. Finally, the intruder warned Aaron not to use the phone or contact the police. If he did, they would kill Denise. After that, according to Aaron, the intruders put Denise in the trunk of his car and drove off. Using the edge of the couch, Aaron managed to remove the goggles and saw that it was exactly 5 a.m. He tried desperately to stay awake, but the sleeping pills were too strong and he passed out. When the alarm went off in the morning, he called work and messaged Denise's manager. Then he fell asleep again and woke up only around 11:30. Looking around, he saw the red duct tape covering the room. Messages from the kidnappers began to arrive with instructions. They demanded 2 payments of $8,500, so Aaron wouldn't have to withdraw more than $10,000 at a time. Aaron tried to respond to them, but got no reply. That's when he realized he couldn't trust the kidnappers. He needed advice, so he called his brother, an FBI agent. His brother Ethan immediately told him to call the police, because criminals always say not to contact law enforcement, but doing so is essential. Holding his breath, Aaron did exactly what he was told not to do. He called the police. Aaron was sure the police would come to the rescue for him and Denise, but he was in for a major surprise. The first thing the 2 arriving officers asked as they stepped into the house was whether Aaron had taken any drugs, especially illegal ones. Aaron explained that the intruders had forced him to take sleeping pills. Despite this, the officers, without hesitation, disconnected the surveillance camera. Aaron tried to insist that the kidnappers were monitoring him through that very camera, but the detectives didn't listen. They noted that the carpets throughout the house had been meticulously cleaned, and in the bedroom, they found a small blood stain on the bedsheets. After hearing Aaron's account, many aspects of his story seemed strange to them. His car was missing. Denise's phone was in Aaron's possession. He had used it to text her boss, and he had waited quite a long time before finally contacting the police. Experienced officers recognized these as classic red flags of a domestic violence case gone fatally wrong. They took Aaron to the station for questioning. His DNA was collected, and his clothes were taken for forensic analysis. When Aaron repeated his story to Detective Matt Mustard about intruders in diving suits, goggles covered in black duct tape, headphones playing pre-recorded instructions and everything else, Detective Mustard couldn't help but suspect he was fabricating a wild, far-fetched tale. After all, where in real life would you hear something like this? Detective Mustard began questioning Aaron about his relationship with Denise. Aaron explained that he had purchased a house in Mare Island in 2012 and was very proud of such a major purchase. He dreamed of living there for the rest of his life, getting married and raising children. He met Denise at work as they were both physical therapists, experienced professionals who had earned a reputation for being excellent at their jobs. Aaron met Denise during a difficult period in his life. He had just broken up with his fiancée after discovering she had been unfaithful. Like any woman in her position, Denise was a little concerned that Aaron might still have feelings for his ex. Their families liked each other, and although they had been together for 7 months, Denise suspected that Aaron wasn't being completely honest with her about his emotions toward his former fiancée. One day, Denise looked through Aaron's phone and found messages he had sent to his ex, saying that he wanted to get back together with her. Naturally, this deeply upset Denise. For 2 weeks, their relationship was on the verge of breaking up. On Sunday, March 22nd, she told Aaron she would come over to his house. They'd have dinner and talk. That's exactly what happened. She brought pizza, and they spent a long time discussing whether they could rebuild the trust between them. Finally, around midnight, they decided to give their relationship another chance, then went upstairs to sleep. Although Aaron explained that he and Denise had reconciled, the tone of the interrogation began to shift. About 45 minutes in, Detective Mustard bluntly told him he didn't believe a word he was saying. No one had broken into his house wearing scuba suits, he said. Instead, Aaron had killed his girlfriend and hidden her body somewhere. Aaron insisted he was telling the truth, begging them to understand that Denise had been in the hands of kidnappers for hours, and that every minute counted in saving her. Her life could be in danger, but the detectives had already warned Denise's parents to prepare for the worst. They had also started gathering information about Aaron himself to assess whether he had any history of violence. Because this was a kidnapping case, the FBI got involved. One of the agents asked Aaron if he would agree to a polygraph test. Aaron said yes, still cooperating because he desperately needed their help to find Denise. But the agent soon began applying pressure, telling him he had failed the test. Unable to take it anymore, Aaron demanded to speak with a lawyer. After that, the FBI tried another angle. They persuaded Aaron's brother Ethan to talk to him, hoping he might coax a confession out of him. But Aaron simply repeated, word for word, the same story he had told the police. Ethan then contacted a lawyer. The lawyer demanded that Aaron be released if no charges were being filed against him. The lawyer had already begun preparing her client for the likelihood that he would be charged with Denise's murder, when suddenly there was proof that the young woman was still alive. At 12:30 p.m. on March 24th, something incredible happened. The San Francisco Chronicle received a message from the kidnappers.
My name is Denise Huskins, and I'm kidnapped. Earlier today, there was a plane crash in the Alps.
It was Denise's voice, and it was clear that she was still alive, because she referenced an event that had happened that very day. The police immediately wanted to speak with Aaron. When he arrived at the station, they asked if he wanted to respond to the message. Aaron reached for his phone, which had been in police possession this entire time, and noticed it was in airplane mode. That meant it couldn't receive messages or calls. The moment he switched it off, the phone was flooded with dozens of texts. It was hard to believe. The police had put Aaron's phone on airplane mode, even though it was the only line of communication with the kidnappers. If Denise really was being held captive, the very people who were supposed to protect her had effectively cut off the only lifeline. Things became even clearer when Detective Mustard spoke with Denise's relatives. But instead of asking questions aimed at understanding what had happened, his inquiries suggested he believed the whole kidnapping was a hoax. At one point, he asked Denise's mother if anything traumatic had ever happened to her daughter. The woman admitted that, as a teenager, Denise had been molested by an older man during a camping trip. But instead of responding with empathy, Mustard allegedly implied that victims of abuse sometimes seek to relive their trauma or crave attention, though he later denied ever making such a statement. In other words, even after receiving proof that Denise was alive, the police didn't reconsider the possibility that the story might be true. Instead, they doubled down on their theory that the whole thing was an elaborate fake. On Wednesday, March 25th in Huntington Beach, a woman calmly approached a gardener and asked to use his phone. That woman was Denise Huskins. But what was she doing in the city where her parents lived? Where had she been for the past 48 hours? And why did she seem so composed? The police, of course, wanted to speak with her. They were probably expecting to see a distraught kidnapping victim, but instead they saw a calm young woman in sunglasses carrying her bags. She repeated the same story Aaron had told them. She had been drugged and taken from the house. Had she been assaulted? No. Had the kidnappers abused her in any way? Also no. Denise admitted she had been terrified, but claimed the kidnappers had treated her with care. She asked to speak to her parents, but the police kept questioning her. And the questions they asked weren't the kind you'd ask a victim, but a suspect. At one point, her cousin Nick, a lawyer, walked in and took control of the situation. Detective Mustard had allegedly told him that immunity would be offered to whoever confessed first. Denise denied any wrongdoing. It was clear she needed legal protection. The FBI wanted to interrogate her and offered a private jet. But her lawyer, Douglas Rappaport, demanded that she take a commercial flight and come to him immediately. Even before the police had all the facts, the Vallejo Police Department held a massive press conference. In it, they practically accused Denise of staging her own kidnapping and wasting the department's time and resources. It was clear the police had made up their minds. Denise and Aaron were suspects. They accused her of avoiding FBI cooperation, of not boarding their plane, and of disappearing. The highlight of the conference was a statement from a police lieutenant demanding that Denise apologize to the public. The media erupted with the story, painting Denise as a real-life version of the Gone Girl character. A woman who stages her own kidnapping to punish her cheating partner while reveling in the media frenzy. Meanwhile, Denise was on her way to meet her lawyer. When she arrived, she was informed of the shocking press conference. Attorney Douglas Rappaport went over her story again and again. She told him that after she was placed in the trunk, the kidnappers drove her to a house and laid her on the cold concrete floor of a garage, covering her with a blanket. For the first time since her release, she began to feel safe enough to share everything. She confessed that she had initially withheld 2 key details from police. One of the kidnappers had served in the Navy. He had assaulted her. On the first day of her captivity, one of the men told her there was a problem. She wasn't their intended target. That meant they had no leverage to ensure her silence. So one of them would need to sexually assault her on camera to keep her from going to the police. If she did, they would release the footage. Denise admitted the man seemed reluctant, but went through with it. The next day, they told her the footage wasn't convincing enough. This time, she would have to act like she consented to make it more believable. After 2 days, the kidnapper said he was keeping his word. She would be released after 48 hours. In the middle of the night, he put her back in a car. But instead of returning her to Vallejo, where there was now heavy police activity, he dropped her off in Huntington Beach, near where her family lived. He tied a blindfold over her eyes, told her to count to 10 and said, "I admire your strength. I wish we'd met under different circumstances." When she opened her eyes, she was standing alone on a street. Her bags were beside her. Still under the influence of the drugs they had given her, she walked to the corner and suddenly realized this was her childhood neighborhood. She was only minutes from her parents' house. She walked there, hoping for safety and a comforting embrace, but no one was home. Her parents were in Vallejo. She spotted a gardener tending the neighbor's yard and asked to make a call. She left her father a message, then asked the neighbors if she could use their bathroom. When she came back outside, the police were already there. Douglas Rappaport immediately called the Vallejo police and requested a medical examination for Denise. At first, the police ignored the request. Then they told the lawyer to have his client sleep in her clothes and not shower, and that they'd speak to her in the morning. Rappaport explained to Denise that she didn't have to speak with police, but if she didn't, they might never catch her kidnapper. She agreed to cooperate, but the response was hostility and skepticism. Her lawyer was even told outright that she had staged the kidnapping herself. On Thursday, March 26th, the San Francisco Chronicle received another email containing a wealth of details about the kidnapping. The author wrote that it wasn't a staged event and that neither Denise nor Aaron were lying. The case was becoming increasingly surreal. The kidnappers were offended that the police and FBI didn't believe Denise and Aaron, and they were eager for recognition of their crime. They even included a photo of the room where they had kept Denise. The kidnappers wrote that, in addition to the kidnapping, they had committed several other crimes on Mare Island. They also admitted that they had started as car thieves, but made little money, so they turned to kidnappings for ransom. They referred to themselves as gentlemen thieves. The email arrived at the same time the police were questioning Denise, so one might have thought that this information would serve as her justification, compelling the police and agents to reconsider their stance. But no. Weeks passed, and there were no breakthroughs in the case, probably because the police were convinced there was nothing to investigate. In their opinion, the criminals were Denise and Aaron. The young couple was on the verge of being arrested at any moment. They lost their prestigious jobs, and people hated them, sending them terribly offensive messages. But soon a breakthrough in the case occurred, one that could change everything. On June 5, 2015, nearly 2 months after the described events, the Dublin police received a report of a home invasion. In the middle of the night, the couple was awakened by the bright light of a flashlight shining in their faces. In general, it started out like the attack in Vallejo, but this time things quickly went awry. When the intruder tried to tie up the wife, the man jumped over the bed and tackled the stranger. The woman ran to the bathroom and dialed 911. The intruder managed to fend off the homeowner and escape, but during the struggle, he dropped his phone. The phone led the Dublin police to Matthew Moeller. Matthew had served in the Navy and left with honors. The phone led them to Matthew Moeller. He had served in the Navy and left with honors, graduated from college summa cum laude, and went on to study law at Harvard. He got married, and a bright future lay ahead of him. But in 2008, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and by 2015, his life had completely spiraled. He lost his job, his wife, and now lived in a remote family cabin. On June 8, the Dublin police arrived at Matthew's cabin with a search warrant. Among them was Misty Caruso, who had only a few days left before officially becoming a detective. But when her boss asked if she would go on the search for the new case, she agreed. Matthew's cabin was filthy. When he was arrested, he didn't resist at all. During the search, Misty immediately had a strange feeling about the place. There were ski masks, stun guns, phones, laptops, and Matthew was driving a stolen Mustang, where they found duct tape, zip ties, a gun with a laser attached by duct tape, and diving goggles with taped-over lenses. Notably, one of the lenses had a white hair stuck to it. However, the homeowners in Dublin were brunettes. Misty realized something terrible had happened, but she still didn't know who the victim was. Misty continued to dig deeper. There was plenty of evidence of an attempted robbery in Dublin, and she could have stopped there, but the case wouldn't leave her mind. Misty traced the rightful owner of the stolen Mustang, who turned out to be a student from Mare Island. The young man mentioned that at the same time his car was stolen, a kidnapping occurred, a kidnapping that the Vallejo police had dismissed as a hoax. Misty remembered this high-profile case and contacted the Vallejo police, telling them about the possible suspect. A police officer from Dublin and 2 FBI agents arrived at the station. After reviewing the collected evidence, they were shocked. All of Denise and Aaron's statements were confirmed, and it turned out their story wasn't as unbelievable as they'd thought. In Matthew's car, they found a GPS device, and among the saved addresses was Huntington Beach in Utica, the very clue that matched the location where the kidnappers had dropped off Denise. In addition to the previously described evidence, police found several drones that the criminals had used to observe Aaron's neighborhood. It was also discovered that they had secretly placed several cameras to monitor his house. Matthew was not charged with sexual assault, but with kidnapping for ransom, because federal court lacks jurisdiction over such crimes. Matthew pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 40 years in prison, although he filed an appeal. He did not give up his accomplices, although Denise and Aaron are convinced that Matthew did not act alone during the kidnapping. Naturally, once the full truth about the case came to light, many questions were raised about the Vallejo police. Perhaps if the police had listened to Aaron and hadn't put his phone on airplane mode, they would have reached Denise much sooner, because, as it turned out, the kidnappers had called him 3 times. They had all the necessary evidence in hand to locate, or at least attempt to locate, the criminal, which could have prevented the Dublin attack. However, the Vallejo police never publicly apologized to the young couple. Even more shocking, Detective Mustard was awarded Officer of the Year in 2015. It's no surprise that Denise and Aaron filed a civil lawsuit against the police. The case was settled out of court, and they received $2.5 million. Soon after, Aaron proposed to Denise. The couple held a beautiful wedding ceremony, attended by their 2 lawyers and Misty Caruso, the woman who found the criminal and helped restore Denise's good name. Not long after, the couple became parents. When asked whether they will tell their daughter what happened, Denise says yes. No matter how difficult their story was, it is a love story, one that led to the birth of their daughter.